What, you won't get any smaller than this? Because why?
It's because you're using Final Cut.
Don't knock Final Cut.
I just did.
That's true. Too late. Oh, are we rolling now? Okay. I am John Tatey. I'm here with Gus Spellman, and we're here to talk about Rebecca, the latest episode of Better Call Saul, and I think maybe one of the best yet, if not the best yet.
Very good episode. Maybe the best. Certainly the best of this season.
I think so, easily. And we're going to start out talking about Kim, because this was a big Kim episode. Gus, tell me what grabbed you about Kim in this episode.
I just love the way that they depict her search for her sort of salvation, you know, intercutting and L-cutting in terms of the sound, just like going through these conversations.
Yeah, no, we had drinks a few days ago, and she said you had a friend who... Oh, so they already settled. I heard you ended up at Harvard Law.
It creates like a constant movement. You're only getting the key parts of the conversations, and they're coming at you very fast.
There are some interesting cuts where she's continuing her solicitous and very friendly conversation, but the video we're seeing is like her shoulders drooping. So this sets up nicely this feeling of her having to keep up this front on the phone while feeling completely different. Like she just feels so low.
I totally know what you're saying about the duality that you're getting, but I think it's also giving you something else, which is how focused she is on this. You know, she's really locked in, and because it's cut so seamlessly, it really feels like she is just charging ahead. And there's that one shot when My Way comes on the first time and she steps into frame and there's the little yellow Post-it. It felt like, because of the music and the colorful square, like a bullfighting scene, you know? Almost
because of the
Toro.
motion of it.
And it's like she's doing, it gives this sense of like danger and intensity. But they're mixing up the way that their audio and video is cut, but they're also mixing up shot scales and creating a pattern in terms of showing you the same locations again and again. But then I love the way that this pattern culminates when she finally gets what she wants. I think something that really immediately strikes us is how different this phone call feels than all the others. It's the only phone call that plays beginning to end with no cutting in between. The location that it happens in, as soon as she opens the stairway going down into the basement, it feels totally different because it's a lot like the shots of the staircase, which has been one of the main locations. And then you get that one long, extremely wide shot, one take, no cutting at all. You know, I think that this culmination is very powerful, and the way that they change the pattern has an impact on you. So I'm just curious, how would you articulate what that impact felt like to you in the moment?
Well, to me, one of the most potent effects of this long montage was not knowing whether anything was actually going to happen. Because I think when you see a montage, you think, okay, this is going to have a happy ending, as most montages do, right? But then it goes on to the point where I started to think, maybe not. Maybe she's not gonna be able to dig herself out of this. To have this long scene where there's no cuts, it allows this gradual realization to take place of, oh, this is actually happening. I think we're experiencing that realization at the same time that Kim is. And one other thing I noticed about this shot, I couldn't help noticing, all the parking garage scenes we've seen to this point have been with Kim and Jimmy, the P3 that we've talked about. I'm not gonna go into the threes this week, but I am gonna have to single out the one, because this is...
I knew you were gonna focus on this one. I'm very curious.
I mean, the whole notion driving this sequence is Kim saying to Jimmy, you don't save me, I save me. And so I think it's fitting that it ends on this shot with the big one in there, because she did not do this with Jimmy's help. And to me, the one is just sort of a little nod toward that. And I'm not gonna make anything more of it than that.
I think that you are right in this case. I think that really does come across if you've been
noticing the numbers, right? This is a change in the pattern. I think it's significant in that respect.
Let me ask you about another, I think, very significant sign here.
Out? Is that what we're gonna talk about?
Yeah. I think this is something that's much more overt than the numbers, because it's a lot more literal. You know, there's been so much talk of her getting out of Hamlin, and McGill, and then you
or at least getting out of Doc.
We're getting
right?
Yes, and the sign is pointing the opposite way from where she's facing, and it's pointing like out of Hamlin, and Miguel. And it seems like, to me, the show is suggesting this is not the way out for Kim. Even though this feels good, it's sort of undercutting this whole sequence.
I'm so relieved you said that, because I thought we were gonna have to fight about this.
No,
but I totally agree.
And I think that they really want you to notice this, and that's part of why this last scene is in a very wide shot, one take, and she's standing right underneath it so that you have time to find this sign.
Well, the frame is asking you to do that. Yeah, I mean, it's always tricky when we get into what they want you to think, because I don't know. I don't know if they want me to notice the P1. I'd be kind of shocked if that wasn't intentional, but I think it works regardless.
Right. I think that they
I think the outside has to be intentional.
Do you think it's fair to say? I think they expect you to notice the out sign. I think that they may not expect you to notice P1 and the other numbers that you've talked about. I'm not saying that it's less legitimate, but I think that they expect you to notice the out sign and to take something from it.
No, my point is only that the frame can signify without the permission of the director.
Yes,
or Gandhi,
I agree with
right?
that, yeah.
Let's talk about Chuck. I think we have some comments from Donna Bowman's exemplary review last night.
Possibly my favorite commenter name so far. This bear is Tops Blooby. The cold open was directed really brilliantly. The color fade and fluorescent lights gave the atmosphere a chill to reflect the coldness of Chuck and Rebecca's home life. I think certainly accurate, and I think you had some other observations.
Yeah. Well, that's a great observation, and it is so striking, isn't it? To me, what this sets up is not only everything that Blooby the Bear, whatever the hell, said in terms of Chuck, but I also think it sets up an important relationship with Kim, because we see Kim throughout this episode in a very similar setting. It's cold, the lighting is very focused and harsh and fluorescent. She is wearing blue.
You have the blue railings all over Hamlin, and Miguel.
Yes, so it's all contributing to make Kim's domain very cold, and it's almost like this is where people go when they've been disappointed, when they've been ruined by Jimmy. They end up in these cold, lonely places, because this is what bonds Kim and Chuck, right? This feeling of being out in the cold.
You know, I think I take something a little different from it. To me, the blue is more associated with Chuck and sort of like Chuck's trap. Like, Chuck's world is this totally blue world. Hamlin, Miguel, I mean, if you follow the actual reality of it, he's part of designing it, and that's all blue. Chuck and his wife, it almost feels like she is trapped there with him. And Kim is now sort of maybe trapped by Chuck. It's sort of ambiguous in this episode.
I like that.
So I think it worked. I mean, I think that you can take either thing from it.
No, but I never thought about that, and I really like that. It does feel like a trap, doesn't it?
And it's interesting because another effect of spending so much time on this montage with Kim, you're really getting a sense of how hard she's trying, like you said. And that really makes it feel at the end of this episode, even though her mannerisms are, she doesn't really want to be there, she doesn't want to get the coffee with Chuck. You also know, like, she's worked so hard to try to get out of her circumstance, and it seems like taking the olive branch that Chuck is extending to her, that's gonna be the only way out. I think you know that she is gonna have to go over to the Chuck side of the force.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tragedy of this episode, right? Is that she insists on saving herself and has the wherewithal and the gumption to do it, and yet she still needs saving from one McGill brother or the other. I mean, that is the tragic end. And I've made myself sad now thinking about Kim's plight.
Well, I mean, but don't you think in Chuck's mind it's only fair? It seems like, because this is the only time you've seen Rebecca, and she's not in Better Call Saul, she is to Better Call Saul as Kim is to Breaking Bad, where you know Kim is not in Jimmy's life anymore, and you know Rebecca is not in Chuck's life
Rebecca's
anymore.
not in the present timeline of Better Call Saul.
And it feels like the implication of that scene at the beginning is that Jimmy's interference has had some effect on Rebecca, and it has something to do with the reason that she's not around anymore. And I think now we're seeing the beginning of how Chuck is going to make that the same case for Kim not being around in Breaking Bad.
That's good. I love that, because those are such great bookends of the episode. Yes, okay, I definitely believe that that's an arc being drawn here now. Good stuff, Gus. Can I talk about Jimmy a little bit?
Yeah,
and
let's
how,
talk about poor Jimmy.
Well, he's really infantilized, I feel, throughout the episode, and I think with purpose. We see Jimmy being the little brother in this first scene. Then he has to be supervised by this associate who underranks him.
He literally calls his babysitter.
He calls her his babysitter. He calls Mike Grandpa Mike. At the window, he holds up this little stuffed animal and does a voice. Again and again throughout this episode, Jimmy is made to seem immature. And one interesting detail we learn in this episode is that Jimmy entered Davison, Maine as a fourth-year associate, right? And we also learned that Kim is a fourth-year associate. So essentially, she got him this job that put him on a par with her. And up to this point, we've really sympathized with Jimmy. We've seen his tribulations, we've seen his hard work, but in this episode, we see how freaking hard Kim works. How can she not resent the fact that Jimmy
and
throws...
he has it so much better than her, too. It's
Yeah.
not like they're like equal fourth years.
Exactly. And it just makes me think, like, so what if he had to get permission for the commercial first and all these things that he's been doing lately? Does he really need to
That's just not what he wants. It's just not what he...
It's not what he wants, and I think what Chuck says in this episode too is that he just can't help himself. But I think that this episode was very effective in turning Jimmy not into an anti-hero by any stretch, but in turning him to someone that we maybe don't sympathize with as readily, which is not a turn I expected to see Better Call Saul take in its second season. Because I feel like in the first season, we were always on Jimmy's side, right?
Do you believe the story that Chuck tells, Kim?
I do, but I have my doubts, right? I don't think I can say 100% true. I have my doubts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether it materializes that there's another side to the story or Jimmy was doing it to help somebody out. Whatever. It could be anything.
I do feel there's more to come, and I'm eager to hear it too.
Let's talk about something that I think you and I are not necessarily as excited to see how it plays out, which is this whole thing with Mike and Hector. The commenters were very, very excited to see. We're very excited. Yeah, everybody is so stoked that Hector is back. I have to say, the one thing that did make me be like, oh, interesting, was TJA68 saying he's ecstatic to finally be able to see the chain of events that leads to Tio's wheelchair.
I have to say that the Breaking Bad lore, yes, it's fun and interesting, but I think that the world of Better Call Saul right now is more compelling to me. I don't need to know the setup for Breaking Bad. I'm not saying one show is better than the other, but I'm saying I don't need the Breaking Bad stuff as much as I like to see this particular world develop further.
I definitely agree. I wish they would spend less time on that. I mean, it's still early to say.
In Vince we trust, I think. I'm interested in the Hector storyline for sure, and I felt that tension at the end of the episode, although it did feel like kind of episode's over now kind of thing, right? It didn't feel like quite the climax that you'd hope for, but not that I needed that. We have to stop talking about this episode, Gus, but we could talk about it all day, I feel like. This is one of the best ever.
It's very rich. Every scene, I think.
But we do have to, all good things must come to an end, so we do have to say goodbye for this week. For Gus Spellman, I'm John Tatey. Thanks for your comments on Donna's review. Thanks for your comments on the video right down below here. And we will see you next week. So long for now.
Bye, guys.